Today I'd like to introduce you to Wolfgang. He is looking at thinking business architecture or architectural thinking, should I say? I love that term. So congratulations for coming up with it. And also looking at EDGY. But before we go into a little bit more detail, let's find out a bit about Wolfgang himself. What drives him? What are his hobbies? What does he like to do? Where he's from? So over to you, Wolfgang. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so thank you, Deirdre, and good morning from Portugal, Lisbon, where I'm currently. I'm Wolfgang Goebl, and I'm one of two founders of what we call the Intersection Group. And my career path goes down all the way to the dark sides of IT. So I've studied computer science in Vienna, and then I became a project manager, business analyst, and eventually an enterprise architect. And I practiced that in Austria's largest bank. And after maybe 13, 14 years, I found out that the whole discipline is sometimes a bit frustrating because enterprises are being architected somewhere else, not really in the IT department. Yeah? So maybe the name of the discipline is not that suitable. And I wanted to change that. For that reason, 5 years ago, I founded Architectural Thinking Association as an association based in Vienna with the goal to make this discipline way leaner, reduce the meta models and make it accessible to the business people. So that was the vision back then. And I created a small language, really easy to apply maps and tools. Yeah, and then 2 years later, I met Milan Günther. He's now my partner, and we renamed the association and also the whole work. Association is now called Intersection Group. And the topic is way broader because what I found after 2 years working with this guy is that architecture is not enough, maybe. Right? So there are more aspects in an enterprise. So I made this journey, if you ask me who I am, from in my professional career, from this classical IT side to maybe enterprise architecture, which is a bit broader, to now we believe a full picture of the enterprise. So that's some growth. The horizon grew a lot when I did on my path.
And what do you do for fun? So before we talk about all the work, what do you, or is this your fun?
Yeah, it's both. To be honest, it's both.
Yeah.
No, but I still have some time for some real fun, if you ask me. So what I do is I'm going geocaching every now and then and play table tennis on a hobby level, but a bit of a competition. And I'm lucky enough to live close to a national park in Vienna. So we have lots of forest and jungle, but I like to call it a jungle. It's really a nice place to go for a run. Yeah, so that's making some sports, but I never stopped working on that stuff. Maybe some hobby of mine, that's true.
That's great. Okay, so tell me about I know that you explained how you got into the enterprise architecture and that you've got your architecture and you've looked at ways in which to improve it and simplify it and bring in elements like design. But what is why that? Why would you want to go into architecture? Like, what was your motivation? Why didn't you just choose something else completely?
One reason is like what? Sorry?
Are you a bit of a geek, or are you just like technology, or what was your motivation?
My initial idea to study computer science was in 1984 when I was 14 years old and all of the first personal computers came up. I was fascinated by that stuff. So this was in age of 14 and I started computer science and I loved being a programmer in my early career days.
That's impressive
So if you
to
want
start
this,
so young.
yeah, so that can be a bit geeky if you want, yeah, but after I think 7 years
Maybe
of
nerdy.
programming, it may be nerdy on a professional level. You find out that if you sit in front of your computer all day long, from 9 to 7 or something like that, you miss some human interaction. So I think that was the reason away from the nerdy stuff, from the algorithmic thinking, from the programming to get in touch with people. And then it just happened that I become a became a project manager, and I went a different path, which is way closer with human interactions. That was the reason.
And which one do you prefer? Because working with people can be really challenging versus working with design and systems and so forth.
Yeah, but I still love this. I know what you mean by challenging. They are not always predictable. They behave in all kinds of ways, especially when you talk to managers and business people under pressure. Been working for companies that were threatened and in fear because what's going on in the market and so on. So that means a lot of emotion. You deal with that. For me, I found it always enriching, right? So to always also understand interaction the human way. It's also a reason I did a systemic coaching training 10 years ago that changed my career fundamentally, because now I have a better feeling what makes people tick a bit and how to intervene into the human system. It's also a system, if you want, the system of relationships between people. I find this still way more fascinating than these predictable machines.
Yeah, we'll get onto the AI topic in a minute after this, but it's really interesting because I've had a conversation with Pierre. He's also one of the people I've been interviewing in this section, and he talks specifically similar to you about having the soft skills and the hard skills, and getting the skills when you're young is really valuable because you have the energy and you're motivated, but when you really want to build a career, you're going to have to work on those soft skills to get your message across. So we don't have to only talk about architecture, but obviously that's one important piece. Why do you think that the role is important to organizations? What else would be important? And then let's have a look at some tools, and that might broaden some of this conversation a little bit further.
So why architecture is important for inside businesses, you mean?
Yeah.
Business people are not always used to think in a structured way, and that leads to all kinds of struggles, I would say. And it all starts with more ubiquitous, more precise language terminology, for example. So if you go in a certain business, they speak a certain slang. And when you go to Department A, they have a different language from Department B and Department C, and so on. So for me, that's the foundation for architecture. It means if you get clearer on the terminology side, then it's way easier to communicate across departments. So for me, this is always the foundation of architecture, clear terminology, because then you have clear names for your processes, for your capabilities, for your entities, for information entities in the database data, and so on. So that makes communication way easier. And then I think an adaptive structure, if you see businesses as in a modular way, in a componentized way, we maybe finally can achieve adaptive organizations. We've been discussing this agile stuff and so on. And I've never seen a really agile company, at least not in big companies. And one reason is because the architecture is not designed for adaptivity. So this plug and play idea, we always have this Lego brick approach we have. And IT people, you learn it at IT university, loose coupling, modularization, and so on, should also be applied on true business components. That means think of them, you have people with a certain skill, so the team maybe inside of the component, the team together with the IT system or application, if you want, and this Lego brick produces defined outputs. So that means that the idea of componentization, modularization, I think it must be applied to true business components to make these adaptive organizations work we all dream of. Agile was around for the last 20 years. Right? It emerged. Now I think it's a bit on a decline. And the reason why it could never work is that architecture was absent in their communities.
That's really, what makes me happy is what you say and what other people in the industry are saying aligns. And that means that is a real challenge in businesses to explain architecture and why it's so fundamental in the structure of the business. All right, so you've been working, and I think we met maybe 2-3 years ago when you had the architectural thinking, and recently EDGY. When did that come out now? I think it was
In
last year.
April, early April, yeah,
Oh,
this year.
this year. Okay, I'm trying to keep track. This year has been a blur, I'm not going to lie.
Mhm.
So if you can share your screen, maybe tell us what your thoughts were around this. What do you think in the future? How could people consider it and look at it? And obviously it's been quite a long passion project because it hasn't just been EDGY. There's been lots of work that's been going on in the background.
That's true. I think first of all, it starts with the definition of what some people call a company. Okay, but we can be more general and say it's an organization. So there are some disciplines calling themselves organizational design. In intersection group and with EDGY, we call them enterprises, and we define them as an endeavor of people with a shared ambition. So it's not only about how they organize, so that's part of the term organization. We put people into the center and their ambition and their journey, so the adventurous journey to pursue the mission into the focus. So maybe that, and that opens up a very broad view on enterprises, and architecture is only one of their parts. And the reason why we believe, the reason why we haven't seen a lot of well-designed enterprises are ignorant disciplines. So you can see enterprise architecture as one of the disciplines, but there are also organizational designers, there are user experience designers out there, there are service product designers, there are executives, right? And isn't the head of the C-suite or the CEO, isn't she the most powerful enterprise architect you can imagine? So we must be aware that there's not this one and only enterprise architect. There are many people not really competing with us, but they are there and they are shaping and redesigning parts of the enterprise every day. And when you read books from those communities, it's sometimes surprising how ignorant the thought leaders are to the knowledge of the other disciplines. So we live in a kind of silos, and that's what we want to bridge with EDGY. We have three, we call them facets. Yeah? So the blue one is architecture, and this architectural thinking work of mine, I created it 5 years ago, is still there. So you still have those typical elements like processes and data assets and IT applications and other assets, physical assets. So that's the blue facet, and it's about how can we make it work, how do we operate. Yeah? But with EDGY, we finally added two more lenses, and that we have the red facet, that's experience. Yeah, how do people that get in touch with us, maybe customers, but it can be also employees. Employee experiences is a big topic. What do they feel, and what difference do we make in their lives for their situation? And then we have the green facet, which is identity. Some say it's the most important. So this is why are we here? What matters to us? What impact do we bring to society? So these are the big questions. And one element there is purpose, for example. Why do we need this architecture? For a certain purpose, maybe. But at the end, it's one enterprise. That's what we see. And you have all of those facets there. Any questions so far?
No, it's good. I like the
Yeah.
visual.
And so think of those facets like a flashlight. Yeah, so you have a blue, a red, and a green flashlight, and you use it to put light on some part of the enterprise, right? And then you can say, okay, I look at these assets or an object, physical object, from the architecture facet, and I ask the question, how does it help us to make us operate? And I can use the green flashlight and I say, okay, what does it really mean if we have a machine that pollutes the environment or a machine that is dangerous for the worker who uses the machine? What does that say about our identity? And what does it convey? And what does it mean for the experience? And so these are the flashlights. And what's really exciting is what happens when you go to what we call the intersection. So we have the purple and the violet and the orange intersection. So maybe an example from the, the, the purple one. So that's the product with this cube in here. So why not connect the question, how are we operating? We operate, we have a process, we have some assets to create our products in the purple. That's a purple element. And on the other hand, the user experience people, the service designer, they look more from the outside in, and they interview, the research, the customers, for example. Yeah, they do a lot of research to understand their needs and their tasks in their daily life. So what's the reality, yeah, in their daily life? And then we can only hope that the experience and the architecture people meet in what we call intersection. So what we want to foster is that people go to workshops, and UXers and IT people in that case meet in workshops for product design, and then they connect to the product design and can co-create together. So EDGY, we see it as a language, and that's if you're not familiar with, that's the Rosetta Stone. And after some months of work on EDGY, we found that those languages between the disciplines are so different. If you go to the UXers, everything is a customer journey and research. So they have their slang, they have their concepts. So these are maybe the red facets of the Rosetta Stone. So it's a totally different language they speak, right? And then we have in the green facet, we have those entrepreneurs and the managers, maybe strategists, executives, and people creating the mission statement, external management consultants on a very high level, strategy people, right? So they produce their glossy PowerPoints and they talk very high level mission, vision, purpose, business model, and then they all too often, I wouldn't say impose, yeah, but often the vision statement and the language it's produced just falls from the sky. And maybe we as architects and engineers, software architects, need to implement it in a certain way. So it's, of course, those people must together to enable a true co-design. Yeah. And that's what we call EDGY, right? So that's what it is.
What does EDGY stand for? Is it?
That's a good one. Enterprise design, graphical interplay. We are pretty sure about enterprise design graphical and this Y at the end. We didn't actually figure it out, but of course it makes it a cool English word. So the ED is for enterprise design, the G for graphical is because, as you can see, it is a playful thing, and that's no coincidence. Yeah, so think of it like game pieces. The EDGY language has visual pieces like wooden game pieces on a game board, which makes it a graphical language to be appealing. And what we want to see is that those various disciplines meet on a large table, like in a war room, right? So maybe not the best metaphor, but on a large table, and everybody moves and places some edgy pieces. I can talk about the meaning and what pieces we have in a second to enable a true co-design process. That's what we want to see, right?
Thanks. Great.
Yeah, after 3 years of reduction of existing meta models, we found out that enterprises can be described and designed. So you could say you model an SE state only with 4 elements. We don't need 35 like other modeling languages that model everything. And we came up with only those 4 base elements where we say that people pursue outcomes by performing activities using objects. And astounding to see that you can model everything inside the company and outside the company. So person can be a customer and he wants to travel from A to B by train, for example. So that's the activity to visit a loved one. That can be an outcome. Yeah, I want to visit my grandma is an outcome. I use this activity to go by train using an object. Yeah, so a train if you want something like that, and that goes on and on. And we apply those facets I've mentioned to those elements, and that's finally edgy, right? So that's what happens when you use the 3 colors on those base elements. So this is the, if you want, the 12 elements we have in edgy, but they, if you want, instantiations or types of those base elements. Yeah, so a product, of course, is an object or a channel in the red. So that's the idea of the language.
Can I ask a few questions?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. So let's talk about the obvious one many people ask if you're in the architecture environment. So you've got a circle for capability, and obviously linked to, let's call it a business object like an asset or a product, and then to an organization. What's the significance of the symbols that you use in the design?
You mean the circles and the squares and so on?
Yeah. What's the...
Okay.
I know
Yeah.
the process looks like a process. I can see that, but I'm not quite sure because purpose is also that. So is there a reason for that, or is it something else?
So this are the base elements again. So we say that a process is an activity. It's a sequence of activities usually. So it's about behavior. Something is going on. So that something happens, some activity is going on. And that's the same with journey in the red facet and with story. So a story is how we talk about what has happened in the past and might happen in the future. So the arrow elements, activities in the 4 base elements, right? And the squares, objects. So an asset is an object we need for our processes and capabilities, like gravel or a machine or a building or an IT system. We need plenty of assets for the processes that finally create our products. And a channel is a structure that maybe customers use to get in touch with us. So the squares, what we call objects or structures. We started with structure. It gets a bit weird when you go to organization and say, okay, this is an object. We could have called it a structure, but so the squarish element are about there's no behavior. So it's about structure. It's not about behavior, and it's not function. It's not an intended outcome. So it's an SEs. And so that the circles here, so we have purpose, capability, and task. Those are of type outcome in the base elements. So we see purpose, of course, is what we pursue in the future on a higher level or a medium level and so on. And the task element is the purpose, if you want, or an intended outcome of somebody who gets in touch with our enterprise. Again, some young lady and I want to visit my grandma. That might be a task which is an intended outcome. I want to meet a loved one is a task in EDGY, which is of course of type outcome. Yeah, so these are the elements, right?
It's very elegant. I like the fact that it's clean. I have a real problem with lines crossing when people do designs and processes. And so it's a very beautiful design. So congratulations for that. I can see what you're doing. It's really a great link and intersection between the different components. So well done. I like it a lot. I suppose there are some things that, like for instance, I'm going to ask another question. I hope you don't mind. So in organizations, we have policies. Would that fit under your content box, which is in the far left-hand corner?
I would say a policy is something written down, right? And so write it down. So it, of course, is an object or a structure. And then you can see it from an architecture lens and say, okay, it helps us. So we might have a policy to run processes in a certain way. So some safety policies, I don't know. So it can be an asset that helps us to run processes in a certain quality without hurting people and without polluting the environment and so on. So you can see it as an asset. but you can also see it in that case as content because usually a policy and the way it's formulated says a lot about the identity of this company. So you can also say, okay, when you focus on it. So the question is, when you write it, and that's exactly what we want to see with EDGY is, okay, I have this object, a structure, a piece of text with some content and information that has meaning. And in this current moment, do we see it from an architecture lens? Do we need it that in a way that it helps our processes? Or do we look from it as at an identity lens and say, okay, is this policy really suitable for our identity? Is it suitable for this shared us, for this shared why? Or is it not aligned with our mission statement? So maybe it's not a good idea if you have a certain mission statement and your policies don't underpin that.
So are you saying then it could then match, let's say, the brand, because the brand would be a key factor in that? That's what we believe and what we do. Or would that be more around purpose? I know I'm just asking questions.
Yes, please feel free to do. A brand is our name and what it stands for. So the brand is how we are perceived, maybe from the outside world, and usually it's a name and a logo. But what it stands for, and if you know some very famous brands, we all know what they stand for. So the brand, if you want, conveys the purpose, but it is not the purpose. We call it an iconic representation of who we are. So it's of course related to the purpose. So you have this link to the green, but of course it's also related to the product brands and to the journeys and what do we really. So the brand might be the connector between what we see as our purpose and what we believe. So a group of people believe what we should pursue. That's the us, the green facet, and the red facet is how our customers may be perceiving us. So does it come across? Is it just a shallow, superficial purpose statement that nobody really trusts, or is it present in all the interactions people have with us in their tasks and so on? So that's why brand is in the intersection between what we want to do and what people perceive when they get in touch with us. Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. I can stop sharing the screen so then I can see you again.
Okay. I know that always is a challenge, isn't it?
It is. Better.
Look, and I think we will provide a few links after this for people who want to see more about this in the videos and on YouTube, so everyone can find it. So don't worry if you've seen it and you want to know more about it. You'll find it in the chat. So a few more questions for you, Wolfgang, if you'll let me. What are your current challenges and opportunities? What do you see happening right now in the near future and in the short past?
You mean with EDGY or in companies or enterprises in general?
Just generally in the architectural space, in what you're doing, but also just what is your experience? What is your, let's call it your intuition around what is going on?
I see a lot of hype in the world of machine learning. Yeah, we all see that. And you can't go to a conference without anybody going nuts about AI. And what do I need to do? Because I don't want to become obsolete and want to get laid off. People don't like that. So some people are threatened already. I'm super relaxed because if you have this architectural understanding and you have a little bit of idea how this works, is okay, machine learning needs petabytes of high quality data so that we get really exciting artificial intelligence use cases. And I think it drives our topic quite well because companies today are operating on masses. So it's usual, it's standard that you have 10 times too many databases and IT applications, which means you have data stored in 10 applications where it should be only on one place. The data quality is poor in 99% of 95% of companies I know, because they have never they never wanted to tidy up their systems. So they always are searching for the next big thing, which now, after 20 years of agile, is now artificial intelligence. And it simply won't work. So we see some AI use cases based on data that is available on the internet. So that's amazing. But as I can imagine, so powerful artificial intelligence use cases once companies unleash the hidden potential of their company-specific data. So for me, this whole movement with artificial intelligence is a driver for enterprise design. So that's why I say, yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, people will recognize that they don't have the data, and then they must make make it back and make the hard work of redesigning, of re-architecting. And it all starts, if you want, with data and applications. You need to consolidate. It's not enough just to put lipstick on top of lipstick on the next level. So that's why I'm super, super relaxed when I look at this topic. It means support for our topic.
Yeah, I would agree. I've been playing with it for a bit, about 10 months now, actively every day. And I use the term playing because I'm discovering and testing and wanting to see. And yes, it's not going to replace architecture's job because it has been set up on historic data and historic thinking, and some of it's good, some of it's not so good. But at the end of the day, it's really about how the human navigates through that, and having a solid architecture in place where you know what you're building and what you're getting is so important. I think people really do miss the mark when it comes to that, to truly understand that.
Yeah.
So,
And it is still too abstract for the business side. So that's also why I created architectural thinking. And with EDGY, I don't. We name the blue facet architecture, but we have those playful pieces. So as soon as they use those pieces and relate them, so if elements and relations, they start to architect their business, and that we hope that it makes it less abstract for them, so that they touch.
There's good side to having abstract because it opens up conversations and it opens up ideas. But at some point you got to get real, but you don't want to overcomplicate things either. So there's such a tipping point as to too much data, which ends up being bad data because you got too much. But also, I imagine over the years, everyone has done their own thing. We know what it's been like for many years, and it's like the Wild West when it comes to data. And I remember doing I did a day-to-day in 2001. So that's 22 years ago. I can't even believe it. But day-to-day, and the way that I was asked because they had implemented this huge SAP system, and it's not like the end users were using it, but they were using it to enter data, whether it was customer inquiries or anything along those lines. But they didn't really understand what they were doing, and they were just entering, like somebody would phone and then they'd type something and it would be junk, right? You couldn't really do anything with it. And fair enough, most of these people had just been taking notes for many years and they hadn't actually had training or anything along those lines. So they asked us to explain why data integrity is important. Now, it's quite a difficult concept to explain to other people. And so we did this training program called Fish in Jeopardy. And Fish in Jeopardy was where we built a fish tank and we told them to hurry up and build the tank because the fish is waiting to get in. And we gave all these little bottles of instructions, and one bottle said, do not put in the tank, but it all looked the same, right? and it was this purple dye. And so all these teams are fighting and they're trying to be as quick as possible, and they're arguing with each other and they're emptying out all this stuff because they want to win, I don't know, some random badge. And every single team ended up with this purple dye in their fish tank. And we actually had real fish. And we said, okay, now put this into your fish tank. And people freaked out. We knew this would happen. Clearly, we wanted to see what the impact would be. Anyway, and during the session, we also served fish for lunch and that kind of thing. So it was fun, but it was a lesson around data. And many years ago, one guy came up to me and he said, every time I see a fish, I think about data. And I was like, shame. That must be horrible. But I think the principle will apply in feeding I think the same principles, because if you're using data, AI is a bit smarter. It might know to try stop things from coming in and that kind of stuff. But yeah, you've got to have a good design, and you've got to know what you're putting in there, and you've got to know why it matters, and all of those factors. That architectural thinking is important. Otherwise, it falls over. But yeah.
Yes.
All right. So what do you think? What skills or attributes are critical to be a successful, let's say, architect or architectural thinker? Because I know it's not only one skill. But what do you think is critical, and particularly for those wanting to enter into the field, thinking architecturally, thinking about the business more broadly, but also being able to drill down into specific areas?
First thing that comes into mind is to balance your left and your right hemisphere of your brain. So you need both. You need, of course, to be analytically strong. And good idea, it's not a bad idea to do a computer science education, study of computer science. It helps. Maybe it's not mandatory, but if you are good in structuring and in good in making a distinction between what's important, what's less important, if you can write text in a concise way, in a structured way, that's because otherwise you will get lost in the messes you have in businesses. There's always too much information, and you must make sense of those huge amounts of process documentation and databases and 200 applications. There's so much. So it's a good idea to be quite fast thinker if you want, and an analytical thinker. That's one side. And the other side of the brain, we know that this people-oriented brain, so the social skills, I see them as like siblings, right? So you must have both of them and balance them each and every day, because you don't really architect. They architect, they make the changes, and you have a lot of fear, political power, a lot of people that are not as analytical strong as maybe you as an architect. So sometimes business people can be a bit all around the place, and they appreciate when somebody helps them to keep the structure going. But that means that you must be able to build trust, so that you are not shy. You need to walk your talk. You must be present when you go to them. So be there as a person, not only as a brain, as an analytical thinker, and keeping that balance is important. It's good when you have some visual skills, so sketching on a flip chart. So because you always work with diagrams on a less structured way, just scribbles on a flip chart, maybe a couple of icons. And so if you're good in drawing, I'm not, so that's maybe a problem of mine. But if you're that's helpful, because then you can start scribbling, and your analytical brain helps you making it more and more concrete and more structured and more structured. Maybe at the end there's some new software to be written, and then it must be precise. So it all starts, it's like a funnel, right? You start with some sketches, and this process from modeling goes into semi-formal approaches, semi-formal diagrams, and finally into code. So it's not a bad idea if you can go across all of those steps. Technology is also important. Some people believe that an enterprise architect must be an expert in microservices, event-based architectures, and the newest Java frameworks. I'm not so sure. So some people would always argue about that. Maybe if you are big in those Java frameworks and in software technology, it can be an obstacle on the way to become a good architectural thinker and architect too, because I've seen too many enterprise architects focusing their career more on the software and the IT technology aspect, that they've been discussing way too much about the boring stuff. So IT has been around for 40 years, something like that, and we haven't invented much. So we still have components and interfaces and events. 10 years ago they came up with microservices. We must understand it, but finally it's about modules and interactions between them. Yeah, so I think that's my answer.
Okay, that's good. So you're saying bring in the design aspects, having some technical knowledge is obviously helpful, understanding how systems work. So very much your edgy picture is to pick a few of those things and say, I understand how this fits together. I've oversimplified it, but I understand what you
facilitate between the actual architects and designers of the business. Be humble, right? And respect the skills of your customer and the people working in the company. They are designing it each and every day, but in isolation. So I see those enterprise design or architectural thinker or architect, whatever, more like a facilitator working with the creativity and the knowledge of the people that are already there. Because if you are new in a company, it will take you 2 years, 5 years, how many, to understand what's going on in the business. And there are some people that have been around for 30 years, maybe. So it's clear that they know so much more compared to you. So I always take this more like an observer, a facilitator, and then I confront them with some findings and some models from less to more structured models. It's more like a coach, enterprise design coach, if you want, facilitator. That's what I'm doing.
Okay, a final question. So I would like you to go back in time to the young Wolfgang who's starting his career. And what advice would you give him that you wished you had at the time? It would have made your life a lot easier.
The first thing that comes to my mind is to be aware about when it's time to leave. Because if you want to make a change, so if you're a young person, many of us, most of us, hopefully, when they're in the younger part of the career and hopefully later on too, want to make a change. I have never met a person who said, I go to office every day to make things worse. I want to ruin my company. Because we are humans, and humans want to create and make things better. I think it's deep in us. Yeah, and my advice would be be aware and find the right point in time to leave when it's time to leave, because I've had some hard times because I haven't left early enough. Because there are signs there. Have a look what's going on in this company, and yes, there are too many companies and too many contexts where you can't make the change you want to change, and then you just burn out. If you want to make a change but the company is not there, then just make the change for yourself and just quit, and leave the company. And there are others. So be aware that you must find the place, and not all companies, it just doesn't work in all companies.
Yeah, that's very good advice, actually. And I think a lot of it is because people are scared, they need to earn money, they want to give it, they don't want to fail, they want to give it a chance. But you're right, you also have to be in the right place at the right time. It's so important, because if you're going to hit your head against the wall the whole time, it's just going to decrease your confidence. You're not going to feel like you're you're going to lose purpose. All of those things can be really challenging in a career. And it happens quickly.
It happens. Yeah. It
so
happens when the
quickly.
purpose or the purpose statement, the mission statement is not aligned with reality and the actual behavior and what's going really on in the company. So if some executives claim we need to go there and we have this higher mission and so on, and everybody in the company knows that's just hollow, that's just a statement, shallow mission statement, but that's never gonna work. So then the whole company falls apart, because if the behavior, the activities, what we are actually able to perceive, our current capabilities, for example, our current culture, the way we behave, the way we act, is not in line with what the leaders say and communicate, that's a perfect moment to quit.
I do agree with you. I do think that there's been, when you look at those purpose statements, I think having vision, mission, etc. for an organization is the starting point of architecture. And its philosophy and its way of thinking, because it creates the culture and it creates the purpose and where it's going. And I actually think it's often missed in architecture, particularly in business architecture, that true understanding of those foundational pieces of why we're here and where we plan to be is often missing. So I
Yes.
think it's good. It's good to bring that back. And again, as architects, we know that we can use that and pull it all the way back to where we, to the task level of what we're doing.
Yeah.
We can do that. So that's good. Okay, I think that's all. Do you have any questions for me, or do you want to add anything, Wolfgang, or anything coming up in the near future that you want to let
Yeah,
us
coming
know?
up, we improve EDGY with annual, we are not sure, maybe every second year releases. So there's much more to come on top of the language. We had our EDGY User Day, our first EDGY User Day 1 month ago in Vienna at our conference. And we've had so many exciting applications of EDGY already. So we want to incorporate the feedback. So EDGY is, we want to set it up like a Wikipedia for architecture and design work, where the people writing books connect and maybe co-create it itself. EDGY itself is the idea to be a community project. It's an open source project, and of course we invite all people to get in touch to discuss, because we believe what we want to happen is a feedback loop. People apply it and write their learnings in a way like in Wikipedia. You create a new article, you update. So that's what we want to see.
That's nice. Very nice.
That's next.
Awesome. You have a website. All of these links will be shared. And if anyone wants to reach out to Wolfgang, he's often on LinkedIn. You can just have a look. So reach out to Wolfgang, and I'm sure that he'll help you with any questions that you might have. And maybe if you locally, you can at least get in touch. But you guys do have a book as well online. Yeah, that's another link we'll add in there for anybody who wants to know any more information. So thanks for openly sharing your story and what you're doing and what you think the future might be. I appreciate your time, Wolfgang.
Yeah, and thanks, Deirdre, for the invitation and for this early morning wake up. I enjoyed every minute and every early minute.
Good. So now you're wide awake and you don't need a coffee.
Yeah.
You might still need that, right? Okay. Thank you so much for your time.